Well, first of all, you must understand there are many ways of being thought as strange. I realize that. And I'm not sure exactly whether I fit into all the categories, but I'll tell you one that comes up every time I go into a decent restaurant for breakfast. Yes, especially for breakfast. The clean, sleek waitress slides up to the table, smiles, "Good morning." She hands me a menu, picks up the coffee cup, ready to slosh the morning brew into it, and I say, "No coffee, please." But my words surprise her. "No coffee? Well, what will you drink?" "Oh, the water is fine. I'll have eggs and toast, please." Well, she takes the order, mumbles now, and stares uncontrollably at me. But no coffee?" "No, thanks." I pick up the local newspaper that I brought into the restaurant, and the waitress glides by and turns around and wonders. But then another waitress comes, and she sees the empty cup there on the table, so she picks it up ready to slosh, and I say, "No coffee, please." Well, that moment should be captured on film because the waitress stands there, coffee pot raised, cup held firm, and her mouth open. No coffee?" "No, thanks." I return to the paper. And the eggs are brought now, and the toast, and grape jelly. It's always grape jelly in a restaurant. And I drink the water, and the waitress watching over me is not ready to capitulate. "Coffee now, sir?" She has an expectant air about her. The coffee pot is poised. Once again, "No, thanks." Well, back at the cashier's counter, a committee begins holding council, and I hear mumbled phrases. No coffee over there. No. Well, what will he drink? Well, what should we do? He turned me down, yes. I'm reading, and then, "Coffee now, sir?" "No, thanks. Doing fine." But, sir, you've had nothing to drink." "Oh, the water is fine." But, sir, it isn't coffee." Well, that's certainly very smart of her to realize that. She leaves, so defeated, and I congratulate myself. No longer will I be disturbed by a waitress whose satisfaction obviously depends on how many cups of coffee she can serve per customer. But then a final try by another waitress, desperate for a return to normalcy. "Sir, are you ready for your coffee now? Or something to drink?" Well, something, of course, means only coffee. Yes, I smile politely. "No, thanks." But then I wonder, what would have happened if I had told the waitress what I really would like to have? What if I had told her of my favorite beverage? Dr. Pepper. But I don't ask for that very often. No, the coffee pourers seldom recover when I do. And I don't really enjoy watching them suffer that way. And I won't make you suffer anymore. Back next time. Thank you. Very often. There are many ways that creativity comes into our lives, and certainly I've experienced over the years I taught at Mount Union wonderful creativity in students in many different ways in classes and their writing, expressing themselves. I'm thinking right now, though, of what is called the Kinney-mobile. It's named for Richard Kinney, the third person in the world to earn a college degree, totally deaf and totally blind. And his degree was here at Mount Union College, yes, back in the 1950s. But a man who had his sight for about 8 years, that's all. How to communicate? Well, there is the International Touch System of Communication and the Braille system, of course, but a friend of Richard Kinney's in Chicago came up with the Kinney-mobile also, giving titles of stories and books and poems and slogans and so on by touch with shape. For example, suppose you wanted to give the title of Robert Frost's classic poem, "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening." A Kinney-mobile would consist of a long string with pieces of paper or other matters attached to it in sequence that by touch and by shape you could get some words in thought. For example, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The Kinney-mobile consisted of an 8-sided little piece of cardboard, a piece of wood, a tuft of cotton, and a cardboard cut in crescent shape. Oh, my goodness, let's see, what would that remind you of? The 8-sided piece of cardboard, the octagon, reminded by touch, a stop sign. If you'd ever seen a stop sign, it has 8 sides. And then, of course, a piece of wood would suggest wood, wouldn't it? And a tuft of cotton in this case, would suggest snow. Perhaps, you see, you have to get the sequence of all of these. It could be other things, of course. And a cardboard cut in a crescent shape might suggest the moon. And so we would have, then, stop sign, wood, snow, moon, stopping by woods on a snowy evening. If you knew the title of the Robert Frost poem, of course, and then we would relate in your thought all of these references. Now, of course, the crescent shape could also suggest a boomerang, I realize that, and of course a tuft of cotton might suggest a hospital, but if you're trying to figure out the title of a poem by a well-known poet, doubt that you've ever heard of a poem titled Stopping by Woods on a Hospitalized Boomerang. So you're putting your awareness and your experience as you would touch, with your eyes closed, as you would touch these shapes. Suppose you came across a kiddie-mobile that had a cheese grater, a little tuft of cat fur, and the shape of a bumblebee. And suppose the category was an American novel of the 1920s. Well, the grater would lead perhaps to great. The cat fur might suggest cat, and the shape of a bumblebee suggests bee. So, Great Cats Bee. Great Gatsby, of course, was the title of the novel of that era. It's a way in which we can communicate. We can be grateful that we have our sight, those of us who do, and that we do not have to go through the touch process here. But it's a creative way on the part both of the one coming up with the idea of the references and the one who is touching them and trying to find out. I did this in classes for many years and trying to bring home some points about language and about the way in which the words we use are the symbols of the ideas, which of course are untouchable. And the words are the symbols that they'll bring those to our thought. It's creative for the person coming up with the ideas, creative for the person who's touching them and relating them to words. Isn't that what we do all the time in communication? And those who have that sense of creative ability, it's a twofold process, that of offering the words and that of understanding the words and receiving them. That's really what language is all about. Let's keep on learning. Back with you next week. Great. Hello. Well, some books, we're familiar with books. Some of them require a great deal of close reading, don't they? Page to page. They do not permit any idle, casual reading and no skipping around. Well, a book that I came across one time is not really one of those. It doesn't require close reading. It's not needed at all. You can skip around, try a line on page 19, flip to page 123 or any other for another line. It's just a compilation of intriguing and sometimes hilarious aphorisms or sayings. For example, Oscar Mayer's creed on page 15, quote, "No matter how many hot dogs you consume at home, they always taste better at the ballpark." Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. And, well, how about Clifton's rule? I found this in the book, page 168, quote, "Some people are like blisters. They never appear until the work is done." And then we have Anthony's rumination on page 159, its profundity, quote, "Little white lies are for golfers." Yes, that has several implications there. Well, and then another one which applies, I guess, to all of the English majors on campus, at least this old English prof sees a good laugh in it. Quote, "To say nothing often reflects a fine command of the English language." Oh, to say nothing. Well, the book that I'm referring to has no deep matter. The collection ranges far afield. Any page is simply a continuation of the listings. There's no editorial analysis, no tedious ponderings. But the intriguing aspect of all this is that you and I can identify with practically all of these references, even though we've never heard of them before. They all have a ring of authenticity. For instance, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. Or a bank gives you an umbrella and then demands it back as soon as it rains. Yes. Don't ever ask a barber whether you need a haircut. Common sense is the least common of all senses. My. And finally, oh, dear me, should I share this one? Perhaps. To err is human. To really foul things up takes a computer. Well, perhaps this sharing of statements will spur your own reading of the book. Publisher's Doubleday. The compiler is John Peers. The book, well, it's a rather long title. Now, reading the pages, very simple. The title is the hardest part of the whole book. Here it is. 1001 logical laws, accurate axioms, profound principles, trusty truisms, homilies, colorful corollaries, quotable quotes, and rambunctious ruminations for all walks of life. That's the title of the book. Well, having read the title, I decided to come up with my own conclusion. A simple statement. Quote, long titles make for short readings. Maybe long programs make for short listenings. I'd better close off now. See you again next week. Well, now, I really wasn't scared standing out there in front of the classy hairstyling salon. I was hesitant, yes. I wasn't scared then, though. After all, any fellow who's gone through an ordinary, usual, plain folks barber for a lifetime is not exactly enthusiastic about visiting an honest-to-goodness hairstylist, and a woman at that. But maybe somebody can really do something about your hair. That's what people told me. I only have 17 strands left on top, but, well, anyway, it was just a mishmash of that gray, a little bit of gray left, practically all white. And so I thought, well, all right, maybe the ordinary run-of-the-mill barbers, they'd probably just want me to buy a toupee anyway. Maybe somebody else, a real hairstylist, could do something. So, bracing myself, I told myself about the courage of the Marines, the bravado of the professional football players, all the adoration the rock stars have. I got up enough nerve finally to go into a hair styling salon, yes. Oh, do you have an appointment? Well, good heavens. Never had one for a barber shop, of course, but the plans had been made over a long period of persuasion and time, and yes, I did have an appointment. And so the lady said, well, sit here till your operator arrives. And so I sat down in the corner of the beauty salon. There's no Sports Illustrated, no Esquire, no... Oh, I did find a Glamour, a Modern Romances, and a Mademoiselle magazine. And I looked around. There was a fellow in a chair down the line, and the operator was a female. My goodness. And then I realized all of the operators there were female. I squirmed. Oh, yes, I squirmed. Because usually when you go into a barber shop, you hear a loud talk about, you know, the Alliance Aviators, the Cleveland Indians, and, well, other things. But here it was very muted. I caught phrases, though. Oh, you look darling. And, oh, this is really cute on you. Oh, my, I squirmed. I squirmed more and more. 5 minutes had gone by, and another fellow came in, but his operator was available. And she began by shampooing his locks. And then, and I couldn't believe this at first, then she began to roll up his hair in little curls, putting the swatches in plastic holders. Oh, well, dear friends, the temperature was rising. I squirmed again. I picked up Glamour magazine. I stared at a lingerie ad, but the music was playing softly in the beauty parlor there. Another fellow was getting a shampoo and saying something like, I think I will use the brown number 17 today. And the operator murmured, oh, it would be stunning to have brown 17 on. Well, 15 minutes had gone by, and I was yearning for a barber shop. Yeah, I'd even accept somebody swearing or spitting some tobacco juice. Well, the young fellow in curlers was stretched out now, and the operator was cutting his hair, I think one at a time. I had the feeling that she was measuring the distance from the right ear with the calipers. Anyway, I remembered Huckleberry Finn at the mercy of his Aunt Polly. Aunt Polly was trying to civilize him. And Huckleberry says, I couldn't stand it no longer. I was in a sweat. Well, I couldn't stand it much more. I was in a sweat also. I felt a strong kinship at that point, though, with Huckleberry. 20 minutes had gone by. I dropped the Glamour magazine on the floor, and I got up and went out the door. Yep. How close I had come to having curlers in my 17 strands. I hurried to the car, huddled under the steering wheel, curiously relieved and yet ashamed, really. Yes, I was. I was ashamed. Alliance had lost its only chance to have one more darling cutie among its citizenry. Instead, it's just an unmanageable, dumb, dull old 17-strand Lyle. Took me a long time to have enough nerve even just to go into an ordinary barber shop after that, what do we say, that close encounter of the curler's kind. But I keep on learning. Oh, and I'm down to 14 strands now. Back with you next week. Well, you certainly keep on learning every day and every circumstance. I thought I knew a great deal. Boy, you keep finding out in different ways. As an old English prof, you keep finding out even about things that you should have known long before in your area of specialization. Some years ago, while leading a seminar on creative writing for high school teachers down in North Carolina, I made reference to a novel by Glenway Westcott. The novel's title was The Pilgrim Hawk. Now, I was using the novel to make a point about symbolism in literature, see? The novel is of a broken marriage, of a man and wife in their middle years finding little in common with each other. Now, in the course of the story, the wife takes up the sport of falconry, and she frequently appears with a hawk on a leash. It's a trained bird sitting on her arm. And inasmuch as the novel dealt with the superiority of the woman over the man in this case, it was her dominance in the marriage, I pointed out in this seminar that the hawk could be thought of in a real sense as a symbol of her husband, manacled to her arm, trained to do her bidding. I thought it was a good point. Well, for whatever significance that may be, the teachers therein assembled began to grin and chuckle as I told the story of the woman with the hawk on her arm. Uneasy, I assumed that the class, about 80% of which were women, I presumed they were just snickering at the chauvinistic illustration I had selected. And then, at a break in the day-long seminar that I was doing, I asked one of them about this dire possibility, and boy, did I learn something. She said, no, that's not it at all. Well, then what prompted all your grins and chuckles? North Carolina. She said, well, it was your pronunciation. You kept speaking of the woman with a hawk on her arm. Well, yes, I said, of course. She said, you pronounced it hawk. Down here, the bird would be pronounced hawk, but you pronounced it hawk. Well, Mr. Crist, the only hawk or hawk as you're saying here, the only hawk we have in North Carolina is a ham hock. And we were all picturing in our minds this strange woman going around with a ham hock chained to her arm. You see, I learned something about dialect that day. I did. It's defined as a regional variety of language characterized by pronunciation or grammar. It's one of the many facets of language that fascinates. Our language is a common denominator among all of us, but the awareness of regional pronunciations, regional meanings, as well as cultural and ethnic speech patterns can benefit all of us. Simply, a poke in Ohio is a jab. Yeah. But in the South, it's a paper sack. And the examples, I think, are quite endless. Language changes. New words are added. Others become archaic. And there are people who make the study of words as their profession. One is Thomas Middleton. And to get a good perspective on language, I'd suggest you go to the library and get the book titled Light Refractions by Thomas Middleton. Now, you don't have to be a strong appreciator of language to get a great deal out of the book. It's there, and it works out in beautiful ways. You find, for example, a little problem that some of my students had in New York City many years ago. They were there on a trip, and in a small restaurant they ordered sodas. Well, they expected the usual ice cream and fizz combination. That's what we call a soda in Ohio. But they were astonished that isn't what they got. Each one received precisely what had been ordered in New York, which was a glass full of soda water. That's it. Well, surprise was the word to describe their reaction, and I must say surprise is the right word both in Ohio and New York. So be it. Keep in mind, words change, dialects, different parts of the country. Become familiar with them, understand them, so that you can do the right job. Who knows, you might be doing a seminar sometime on creative writing, or at least you might think about that possibility and come up with the wrong pronunciation. And you've got a whole group of teachers picturing this lady with a ham hock chained to her arm. No, I really haven't seen that situation. Not on campus, not anywhere in Ohio. Back with you again. Hello. I guess our world does seem to have a great deal of violence and mayhem and unrest in it. That's true. And too many people use their fists or guns to express their unhappiness. Maybe what we need is to appreciate our language a little more. A means of venting ourselves. Might be. Remember that novel, Billy Budd, by Herman Melville? I hope some of you on campus have come across it. It's a young innocent sailor. He's accused of instigating a mutiny. When he's confronted with his charge, he's unable to express his feelings. No, a speech impediment then manifests itself, and he resorts to his fists to show his innocence, and that action ultimates in the loss of his life. That's the rest of the novel there. Well, this few minutes with you isn't about the novel, but it's about using our fists instead of words. Maybe the Billy Budd novel was an exaggerated circumstance, but our ability to come up with words that express our sentiments is important, and our inability to come up with them can prompt violence. Now, another point, aren't those who are profane really lazy in language? They only have 3 or 4 words or phrases to summarize anything they have to say. Yeah. Well, beyond the blasphemy of such expression is laziness, ineptitude, if you please. Maybe we need some more creative expressions to get things going. Maybe we could use some creative put-downs, even. Benjamin Disraeli, replying to a young author who had sent him a manuscript for evaluation, he wrote, "Many thanks. I shall lose no time in reading it." Ooh, there's a put-down for you. Ken Tynan came up with a definition of a critic, which is rather violent, but in words only. The critic, it's a man who knows the way but can't drive the car. Alexander Wolcott came up with a terrible review of a play. Terrible in that he didn't like the play. But he didn't use his fist, he didn't use a gun. He just said of the play, the scenery was beautiful, but the actors got in front of it. Oh, my. He later summarized, the play left a taste of lukewarm parsnip juice. And then we have a definition of professors. Professors? Yes. George Seville came up with one to teach. He said, the vanity of teaching often tempteth a man to forget that he is a blockhead. Ooh, don't pass that one along too readily, no. Or even worse. Oh, now this is nasty. But it's still better, I think, than using a gun. Education is the process of casting false pearls before real swine. Well, if you want to see more of those put-downs, or if you want to vent yourself or see how others do it, you might read a book with the lengthy title, An Irreverent and Thoroughly Incomplete Social History of Almost Anything. The author is Frank Muir, M-U-I-R, and it wasn't published. Oh, it's been about 20 years since it was published. I think 1977. Might be in the library. Go check it out, especially if you know where the library is. Yes. Finally, well, a classic put down. It's attributed to Newt Rockne. I don't know whether it actually happened, but I've heard this many times, that after a disastrous first half, the Notre Dame football team retired to the locker room, cringing, tense, awaiting a tongue lashing. They waited and waited and waited, but through the whole halftime, the coach did not appear. Finally, with just a minute left, before going out on the field, Newt Rockne entered, scanned the room, player to player, in a tomb-like silence, and then, with a flip of the head and a very audible sigh, he merely said, "All right, girls, let's go back on the field." And they won the game because of their action in the second half. Well, so be it. I suppose the most creative put-down I've ever encountered in my casual reading, I came across in an issue of the Saturday Review, a very brief, single-sentence review of a new book. Get this review, quote, "This is one book you will want to read through from beginning to ending, because you know if you ever put it down, you'll never pick it up again."